Good afternoon, colleagues. We're going to begin this afternoon's business with portfolio questions on communities and local government. And our first question is from James Kelly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to address the needs of local government.
Cabinet Secretary Aileen Campbell.
Thank you. Maintaining a close constructive partnership with local government has always been a priority for this government. This partnership approach enables us to meet regularly with COSLA and respond positively to the needs of local government and their communities. For example, I recently undertook extensive engagement with local authorities on our levels approach within the strategic framework and continue to do so. We are supporting the European Charter for Local Self-Government Bill, a long-held aspiration of COSLA, and the overall COVID-19 support package for councils is up to almost £1.8 billion over this year and next.
James Kelly.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but the needs of local government aren't helped by a decade of SNP cuts. £937 million of cumulative cuts have piled agony onto local communities, resulting in councils having to cut services and undermine their ability to protect jobs. This can be seen in the South Lanarkshire budget, as the Cabinet Secretary will be aware, where there were cuts in excess of £5 million. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, when are the SNP going to start standing up for local communities and stop cutting local government budgets?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. We've continued and will always continue to treat councils fairer. I set out a range of ways in which we engage regularly and thoroughly with local government. This current settlement that's been decided upon through the processes of the budget will mean that local government will get £11.6 billion, a fair and affordable settlement. It's an increase day-to-day funding for revenue services of £335.6 million, or a 3.1% increase on last year's settlement. In terms of South Lanarkshire, South Lanarkshire Council will receive total funding package of £649.3 million to support local services, which includes an extra £15.5 million to support vital day-to-day services. Of course, we've managed to deliver during the tenure of this government fair, affordable settlements for local government, treating them fairly, engaging with them thoroughly, despite ourselves being under a decade of Tory austerity, and we'll continue to engage positively with local government as the budget bill progresses through Parliament.
Thank you. Supplementary from Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise the Chamber as to whether the Labour Party has approached her to say from whence additional funding for local government should be sourced, from the NHS, justice or education budgets perhaps, or if through increased taxation, has Labour said who would pay and how much taxes should be increased by?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I know my colleague, the Cabinet Secretary Finance, has been liaising with all parties in the Chamber to discuss any budget propositions and to listen to their priorities. But interestingly, I'm not aware of any specific proposals from Labour as to where any additional funding should be sourced. And of course, we're going to be hearing, and we will be hearing and continue to hear the budget developments in Westminster. And the Finance Secretary here will continue to continue those discussions with opposition. But as far as I'm aware, despite the calls for more money, I've not heard anything specific from the Labour Party.
Thank you very much. Question 2, Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the final report of the Homelessness Prevention Review Group?
Minister Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We commissioned this work in response to the recommendations the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Action Group made for ending homelessness. And we very much welcome the Prevention Review Group recommendations, and we are grateful for the commitment of Crisis and other partners in terms of delivering this report. In particular, I'd like to express my thanks to the vital role people with lived experience of homelessness had in shaping the recommendations. Shifting the balance of services and response towards prevention is more important than ever given the current public health crisis and the rapidly developing economic crisis. We will now give full and proper consideration to the recommendations and will publish our formal response later this year.
Thank you. Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. The report does include many very valuable contributions to the debate on how to prevent homelessness, and I hope the government will take seriously its recommendations. In particular, it would be good to know early on if the government intends, as recommended, to make permanent some of the emergency coronavirus changes in relation to the private rented sector. And can the Minister tell us what additional measures he believes are necessary to strengthen the position of tenants in the private rented sector as part of the drive to prevent homelessness?
Minister Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I agree completely and utterly with Mr Harvey that this is a very, very valuable report. And that's why the government will give consideration to it and to improve on our homelessness prevention legislation at the earliest opportunity. We made this clear at the very outset when we commissioned this report in 2019. The recommendations are thorough and we'll need to work through them in order to get the right legislation in place. In terms of some of the measures that have been put in place during the course of the pandemic period, yes, we will look to see how we can implement some of those in normal day-to-day business. For example, pre-action protocols for the private rented sector is something that I would like to see continue. What none of us want, I am sure, is a situation at the end of this pandemic where we put people in cliff-edge situations. We must do all that we can to prevent homelessness as we move forward. And what would be useful in all of this would be if the UK government did a U-turn and continued with the universal credit payments that are being made at this moment, if they actually looked more closely at housing benefit and local housing allowance, and if they got rid of the benefit cap. That would help prevent homelessness without doubt, and I hope that they will do so.
Thank you. Question 3 has been withdrawn. Question 4, Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had regarding changing the ring-fence criteria concerning the sectoral funds distributed by local authorities.
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary Aileen Campbell.
Thank you. Scottish ministers have listened carefully to local authorities and taken steps to replace the number of COVID-related ring-fenced funding streams. For example, in the current year, councils will have complete autonomy to deploy the additional COVID funding of £275 million announced on the 16th of February, the £120 million discretionary fund to support their local business community, and the general £259 million confirmed for next year as they see fit. The Scottish Government will continue to work in partnership with COSLA and local authorities to ensure our communities receive the lifeline support and services that they expect and deserve.
Rhoda Grant.
I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary has listened to businesses, though, because I've raised on a number of occasions with the Scottish Government the rigid criteria attached to those funds. And many organisations find that they do not fit easily into that criteria and therefore miss the safety net available. Some of these companies are paying off staff as I speak. At this late stage, will she review this and hand a lifeline to companies that are folding now, companies who with help could survive and boost our economy post-COVID?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, my colleague Kate Bird has engaged regularly with local authorities and business, along with other colleagues, including Fiona Hislop, around the supports that should be in place to help support business. And that's why there has been put in place discretionary funding to help support the local business community and to ensure that there is autonomy there for local authorities to help support those businesses that are so critical for their local economy. If the member has particular businesses that she wants to raise as a particular example of where the plethora of supports packages do not fit the needs of that particular business, then I'm sure my colleagues would be really interested to know, because we want to ensure that we do all we can to support businesses, and that's why we have adapted and changed the funding to meet the needs of businesses that we regularly engage with.
Rhoda Grant again.
Just to clarify to the Minister that those businesses are such as those businesses that pay harbour dues, canal dues, that's the same as paying business rates, but they haven't received a penny to date. They are folding and need your assistance now.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah, and I made the offer, I think, quite clearly. If the member had particular businesses that she wanted to raise the plight of, that she should do so, so that we can work collectively to make sure that businesses feel the support that they require. I think that's a fair offer. She's raised particular businesses with particular needs in our communities and local government question session, and I'm offering her to try and meet with her or to find some ways and solutions to help support those businesses.
Thank you. James Dornan, to be followed by Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. Cabinet Secretary, this is a subject that comes up at my local government and communities committee fairly regularly, but could you maybe outline what changes the SNP government has made to previous ring-fence funding streams to provide local authorities with greater flexibility in deciding how best to allocate their total resources to services?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. So when the SNP came to government, the vast majority of previously ring-fence funding streams were abolished by removing ring-fencing from the funding and adding it to the general revenue and capital grants, and this reduced the total ring-fenced funding by 1.8 billion. With the introduction of the People Equity Fund and expansion of early learning and childcare, the total ring-fence funding for 21-22 is less than 8% of the total 21-22 local government finance settlement. So again, we endeavour to continue to work with local government to make sure that they have the resources that they need. And I've already indicated to James Kelly just how much that means for them in terms of their day-to-day spend.
And Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Since 2013-14, the amount of money given to Scotland's councils that has been ring-fenced by the Scottish Government has increased by 6%. That's almost £800 million that councils have no control over. Communities across Scotland have different priorities, so when will the Scottish Government recognise that a one-size-fits-all approach is not working and provide funding necessary to support local services and rebuild our communities?
Cabinet Secretary.
Forgive me, Presiding Officer, I think I came to the Chamber last week where the Tories were precisely proposing a one-size-fits-all approach to local government. But nonetheless, we will continue to work with local government. I've set out through my response to James Dornan that when we came to government, we reduced ring fencing. I set out what that level of ring fencing is within the current budget. I've also set out to James Kelly just how much we have increased local authorities' budget settlement, which is going through the budget process as we speak, and what that means in terms of day-to-day revenue increases for local authorities. And we'll continue to work with local authorities to make sure we continue a fair and affordable settlement for them that enables them to meet the priorities of the communities that they serve.
Thank you. Question 5 has been withdrawn. Question 6, Ian Gray.
To ask the Scottish Government when it last met East Lothian Council and what was discussed.
Cabinet Secretary.
Ministers and officials regularly meet representatives of all Scottish local authorities, and that includes East Lothian Council. That engagement enables discussion on a wide range of issues as part of our shared commitment to work in partnership with local government to improve outcomes for the people of Scotland.
Ian Gray.
Thank you. Over the last 20 years, East Lothian has experienced the highest percentage increase in population in Scotland, with growth 3 times the Scottish average. Over 10,000 new homes are being built in the county as a requirement of the Scottish Government's national plan. Such growth requires significant extra resources to meet the increased demand on local services, but East Lothian Council has not received such additional investment, leaving it with a gap in its revenue funding for 2021-22 of over £4 million. Can the Minister explain why East Lothian has not been given the fair funding it needs to support local services?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. I thank Ian Gray for the question. I've set out that we engage with COSLA regularly around finance, and that is particularly done through my colleague Kate Forbes. If there are to be any changes to the distribution settlement, then that has to come through COSLA. You know, the Scottish Government has always maintained a position that if there is to be, and if there's a desire for a change to the distribution settlement, that we would be open to those discussions, but that has to come through COSLA, and so therefore I would advise the member to direct his authority to engage in those discussions with COSLA.
Thank you very much. Question 7, Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with local authorities about housing adaptations.
Minister Kevin Stewart.
Presiding Officer, health and social care partnerships are responsible for the planning and funding of housing adaptations. So the Scottish Government has had no direct specific discussions with local authorities about adaptations. We have committed to review the current housing adaptation system, and we are engaging with all those involved in the adaptations process, including local authorities. We want to ensure how best we improve and streamline the system and maximise the impact of investment whilst meeting the needs of people.
Annabel Ewing.
I thank the Minister for his answer, and it is good to hear of the ongoing review. However, in the current climate, in terms of the coronavirus pandemic, can the Minister clarify whether housing adaptations should in fact be considered as essential works for the purposes of the coronavirus legislation in place? And will the Minister undertake to impress upon local authorities how important it is that housing adaptations are now expedited? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank Ms Ewing for what I think is a very important question. The Coronavirus General Guidance for Safer Workplaces provides examples of essential works. Adaptations are essential if they enable someone to be discharged from hospital or address an urgent health or welfare issue. There is no reason to delay necessary adaptations unless the occupants are shielding or choose not to have workers in their home. It would, of course, be important for all risk assessments to take place to ensure that all health protection measures are in place to keep workers and householders alike as safe as possible while any essential work is carried out. But that work should be carried out as it is essential.
Thank you. And question 8, Tom Mason.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to meet its target of building 50,000 affordable homes.
Sorry, Minister.
Presiding Officer, latest published statistics to end of September 2020 show that since April 2016 we have delivered 36,046 affordable homes, over 24,000 of which were for social rent. This would have been an increased number, but the impact of COVID meant that there was a necessary pause in the delivery of affordable homes at such a critical time in our target period. We are continuing to work closely with all partners across the housing sector to deliver the remaining homes as quickly as it is safe to do so.
Thank you. Tom Mason.
Thank you for that. I remind colleagues I am a councillor in Aberdeen City. In line with Aberdeen's local outcome improvement plan, the council has agreed the ongoing programme of 2,000 new homes will be built to the industry gold standard. This makes them greener, cheaper to run with better natural light and sound insulation, provide a dedicated space for working or study, and storage for electric wheelchair, and will lead to a reduction in fuel poverty. Does the Minister agree this model would be ideal for similar projects across Scotland? Would he join me in welcoming the exemplary work of the Aberdeen City Council's leadership in taking this plan forward?
Mr. Kevin Stewart.
Presiding Officer, I've heard since 2012, I think, that the Council in Aberdeen were going to deliver 2,000 council homes, and we've yet to see very many of those on the ground. The Government has given additional funding to Aberdeen from above their resource planning assumptions, monies that weren't spent by other local authorities, and I do hope, for the sake of my own constituents, that those homes will be forthcoming. Obviously, in terms of quality, I want to see quality improved right across the country. Obviously, in terms of the government's decarbonisation agenda to tackle the climate emergency that we have, it is important that we continue to drive up quality. Of course, the government itself has a number of pilots going on at this moment, including here in Edinburgh, to ensure that we can do our level best in delivering low-carbon quality homes. And I hope that Mr Mason will go back to his colleagues in Aberdeen City Council and push forward in delivering their promise of 2,000.
And Richard Lyle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd be grateful for the Minister's views on the Tory government's decision to slash the allocation of financial transactions and what impact this will have on the support available to home buyers and delivery of new homes.
Minister Kevin Stewart.
Presiding Officer, there has been a significant cut of 66.5% of the total Scottish financial transactions budget in 2021-22. Two-thirds of a budget slashed by the UK government. That amounts to a reduction of £412 million. And the Scottish Government has mitigated this as far as possible. However, this cut has led to some difficult choices about the use of the allocation in 2021-22. And has, of course, resulted in a reduction in the First Home Fund budget and the need to close the main Help to Buy Scotland scheme. I wish that Tom Mason and his colleagues, who continually go on at us around about increasing housing supply, would go to their Westminster colleagues and tell Rishi Sunak to give us that money back, because that is what is required in terms of delivering homes to meet Scotland's need. And it is a pathetic scenario where the UK government cuts budgets to the extent that they have two-thirds of a budget slashed.
Thank you very much. Now that brings us to the end of communities and local government portfolio questions. I've just noticed in Blue Jeans that this may in fact be the last contribution from Cabinet Secretary Aileen Campbell, certainly the last time that communities and local government is timetabled for the end of the session. So I'd just like to put on record my own thanks for her contribution over many years as a parliamentarian. Having said that, I may select a topical question between now and the end of the session, so don't quite switch off yet. I'm also conscious that we're now in March. There are only 3 weeks to the end of the session, and there will be several opportunities, including the debate later this afternoon, where members will be making potentially their last contributions, and I hope we'll be able to acknowledge that in a fitting manner. But moving on now, turn to the social security and older people portfolio. The first question is from James Dornan.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how its social security measures will support low-income households.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville.
Our new social security system is already increasing financial support to thousands of people on low incomes, including families with young children, carers and those who have lost loved ones. The budget forecasts that we will invest £3.5 billion in 21-22, and £435 million of this is for low-income households through the Best Start grant, Scottish Child Payment, Carers Allowance Supplement and funeral support payments. The Scottish Child Payment is a game-changing intervention in our fight against child poverty. It is the most ambitious anti-poverty measure currently being undertaken anywhere in the UK and will make a direct and significant impact to the incomes of thousands of low-income families.
James Dornan.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. And I noticed that the Northern Ireland Executive decided to provide a winter payment to recipients of disability benefits and pension credit. Would the Scottish Government consider a similar scheme?
Cabinet Secretary.
I have looked at with interest with what the Northern Ireland Executive has done with this regard. The Department for Communities is responsible for delivering disability benefits and means-tested benefits, including pension and credit in Northern Ireland. and therefore have the data and the technical infrastructure to do so, enabling the Executive to agree this payment and deliver it at relatively simple and short notice. When I considered a similar payment in Scotland, I noted that it would require the development of entirely new systems and processes with complex dependencies upon the DWP that would take time to develop. And this is one of the frustrations I have with the current devolved settlement, and therefore I unfortunately had to rule out a similar intervention. We have, however, as the Scottish Government, committed over £500 million of additional investment to help people and communities during those difficult times. And alongside this, of course, we have introduced a child winter heating allowance this year for the most severely disabled children with day and night-time care needs.
Thank you. I should have indicated that in this session, in this portfolio session, question 1 is actually grouped with question 8. So I'm going to turn to question 8 next before taking supplementaries. John Mason.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how its welfare policies have supported low-income families with children during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Cabinet Secretary.
Throughout the pandemic, the priority for Scotland's social security system has been to ensure families continue to be paid the money they rely on, as well as the delivery of our game-changing new Scottish Child Payment. Alongside this, we have also committed over £500 million of additional investment to support people and communities impacted by the pandemic, with a particularly strong focus on children and families. This includes £140 million to promote food security, of which £51 million was specifically invested to continue the provision of free school meals for eligible families during school closures and holiday periods. Our £100 winter hardship payment put £14.4 million in the pockets of families, and we have now committed to a further £16.8 million to reach up to £168,000 through a spring hardship payment to be paid shortly. Additionally, we have, of course, introduced the £500 self-isolation support grant.
Thank you. John Mason.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I wonder if she feels this could only work in Scotland, or if perhaps neighbouring countries like England would be able to learn from this.
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm certainly sure that all countries across the UK can learn from each other when it comes to what can be done to support people through the COVID pandemic and beyond. I do agree that the UK Government could be doing more to support low-income families, and that is particularly those on universal credit. I note that the Chancellor has announced that they will continue the £20 uplift on universal credit up until September. This is an unfortunate development that he has gone this far and no further, because the fact that the £20 uplift was brought in shows in itself that the universal credit was not fit for purpose and was not enough to live on in the first place. And I therefore would encourage him to look once again at this and to update the legacy benefits too.
Thank you very much. We turn to question 2, Mark Ruskell.
Thanks. To ask the Scottish Government what the impact has been of widening the eligibility criteria for the self-isolation support grant.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville.
From the 16th of February, we extended the eligibility criteria of the grant to anyone who needs to self-isolate if they earn the real living wage or lower, to applicants entitled to a council tax reduction because they are on a low income, and people with caring responsibilities for someone over 16 asked to self-isolate, where the carer themselves meets the other eligibility criteria. These changes mean that an additional 390,000 people could be eligible for the grant should they require it, helping remove any financial barriers to isolating. We will begin reporting on the figures on the impact of the updated eligibility from April 2021.
Mark Ruskell.
Thank you, Secretary, for that answer. I look forward to seeing those figures. But as we make strong progress in suppressing the virus, the numbers at stake are going to dwindle, but the importance of that self-isolation is going to increase. It's going to be critical to stop new variants taking seed. I think we've seen an example of that in Aberdeen this week. So would the Cabinet Secretary agree that going forward, what we need is if we have low numbers of people needing to self-isolate, then why not make those grants unconditional so that people self-isolate as quickly as possible within hours rather than waiting days or weeks before making a decision?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I would agree with Mark Ruskell that we absolutely need to ensure that people understand and appreciate the importance of self-isolation, and I think they do when we look at the levels of compliance that there are across the country. People are taking this very seriously, and I would like to thank them for what they're doing. We have always done since we introduced the self-isolation support grant, worked with local authorities and others to see what more can be done to support self-isolation. I think the eligibility that we have now is wide to ensure that we are providing support to people on low incomes that require it. There is more that can be done to support self-isolation, and that doesn't include just the self-isolation support grant, but also, for example, what we need to do to ensure that businesses encourage and support their employees to be able to self-isolate, something which I know some of Mark Ruskell's colleagues and he himself have been keen to ensure that the government looks at. So I can assure him that we are looking at this in the round, but we will continue to keep the support grant under review to see what else can be done to ensure that this very, very important part of our work on coronavirus continues.
Thank you. Question 3, Finlay Carson.
To ask the Scottish Government what the most recent estimate is of the cost of establishing Social Security Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
The programme business case, which was published in February 2020, describes implementation costs of £651 million to 2025-26. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has meant that we've had to replan our delivery schedule, and while we would anticipate the phasing of these costs to change between years, we would at this time anticipate remaining within this overall figure. We still expect Social Security Scotland's administration costs to align with the programme business case once in steady state 2. This stated a cost of administration being around 5% of the value of benefits paid, which is broadly comparable to the Department of Work and Pensions.
Finlay Carson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Benefits Take-Up report published by the Scottish Government this week outlines that there is a range of reasons why people are unaware of the benefit entitlement. So can I ask what specific work the Social Security Scotland local delivery team and Dumfries and Galloway is doing to ensure that my constituents understand and can apply to all the relevant benefits that they may be eligible for?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I would point out initially to Finlay Carson that this government has a benefit take-up strategy, unlike the UK government, and I hope that the UK government would do a take-up strategy, because it's important to note that we are not responsible for all the benefits up here. So I would like all governments to work together on this, something I wrote to the UK government about along with my Welsh and Northern Irish colleagues recently. The local delivery plays a valuable part in the work that our agency will do in terms of its work with stakeholders to ensure that they're aware of what is being done in the local area, and also to support individuals to make sure that they can have support to provide information for an application form and they feel supported during that process. Again, something that's very different to the experience that people will have through the DWP. So we are absolutely committed, not because just it's our statutory duty to ensure that we have a benefit take-up strategy that works well, but also because it's the right thing to do for people. And of course, I would say that there is much more that can be done out with the local delivery in terms of the work under Aileen Campbell's portfolio, which supports Citizens Advice and other agencies to have teams which go out and actually work with income maximisation to ensure that people right across the country have the support to be able to know what benefits they are entitled to. I would hope that was something that all governments could support across the UK.
And Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell the Chamber how many people throughout Scotland have received payments through the new Social Security system and what the budget is for payments next year?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government has provided over £540 million in payments since the introduction of Social Security Scotland in September 2018 up to 31st of March 2020 through the delivery of 8 benefits. By the end of this financial year, the payments administered by the agency are forecast to support over 113,000 people. As set out in the 2021-22 budget and in line with the Scottish Fiscal Commission forecast, we are committing £3.5 billion in forecast social security payments to reach over 800,000 people, money which will go directly to the people of Scotland who need it most. That, of course, includes £68 million for the first full year of the Scottish Child Payment.
Thank you. Question 4 has not been lodged. Question 5, Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how many Scottish Child Payment claims it has received for individual children and households, and how many have now been accepted and paid.
Cabinet Secretary.
The latest published management information shows that by the 28th of February, Social Security Scotland had received 98,000 applications for the Scottish Child Payment. Of the 85,000 applications that had been received by the 14th of February, 55,000 applications have been processed by the end of February. This means that 65% of those applications received before the 15th of February have now received a decision. In total, 52,000 of the processed applications were approved. Parents and carers will receive a letter advising them of the outcome of their application in due course. Details of when people should expect their first payment and how much will be contained in that letter. An application could contain more than one child. Further time is required to interrogate the decisions and payments data to be able to produce robust estimates of children. More detailed information on application outcomes and payments, including an estimate of the number of children who have been approved for the Scottish Child Payment, will be included in the next release of official statistics, which will cover the period to the end of March and is due to be published on the 11th of May.
Mark Griffin.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, and I'm pleased that families are now starting to receive this crucial payment. Now, the Cabinet Secretary knows that up to 173,000 children are eligible for this payment, and it's rightly been described as a game changer, but it's only a game changer if they actually get it. Can the Cabinet Secretary say how she plans to reach all of those 173,000 children, hopefully, and would the Government consider backdating the payment for up to a year for those that are perhaps unaware of their entitlement and apply later on?
Cabinet Secretary.
With reference to the backdating, the system for Scottish Child Payment has not been built with an ability to backdate. If we were to do this, and I had explained this to Mark Griffin before the Scottish Child Payment went live, we would have inevitably had to delay the go-live date for Scottish Child Payment, and we felt it was very important to get the payment in as quickly as possible and for money to be received as quickly as possible. We'll endeavour, of course, to do absolutely everything that we can. I referred in a previous answer to the benefit take-up strategy that we have. I'll give one example, and it is just one example of what we've been doing on this, is that we've already written to the individuals, for example, that we know of within the data feeds from HMRC and from the Department of Working Pensions, proactively inviting those people to apply, and we will of course continue to do that as more people access those qualifying benefits. And I give that as one example of something which the agency has done for Best Start grants before, which we're now doing for Scottish Child Payment, and which we will continue to do in the future as new people, as I say, access those qualifying benefits.
Thank you. And Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, making people aware of this new payment is very important, as has already been mentioned by others. And you did mention about the fact that you have contacted applicants or who could be applicants who are receiving benefits. Is there any other way that the Scottish Government can make people aware of the fact that this new benefit, which is a life changer, is available to the people who are entitled to it?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah, I can perhaps elaborate a bit more on what else we've already done for the Scottish Child Payment, and that's a lot of work, for example, with key and trusted stakeholders to ensure that they were aware of what was going on with the Scottish Child Payment, and they were encouraging people within their own networks to be able to apply for that. There were a number of stakeholder roadshows which took place at the end of last year to support that work, and we are also planning a multimedia campaign later this month targeting parents through TV and digital advertising. So I gave one example to Mark Griffin. I hope some of the other examples I've given to Sandra White demonstrates how seriously we're taking this issue.
Thank you very much. Question number 6, Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action the Minister for Older People and Equalities takes to ensure that its policies do not contribute to loneliness and isolation.
Cabinet Secretary.
We know COVID has impacted communities, and that includes many thousands of older people. That's why we've provided funding throughout the financial year. Our winter plan provided over £6.5 million targeted action around equalities, tackling isolation and loneliness and digital exclusion. And in the spring of 2020, our £350 million communities funding support also consisted of 4 funding streams, including a £50 million wellbeing fund supporting third sector activities and communities. The £12 million immediate priorities fund also provided investment through national partners to support Scotland-wide or multi-area work. This rapid response was a reflection of our concerns about the seriousness of the situation and our recognition of the need to support communities during this crisis.
Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary, for that response. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the time and task model for commissioning social care for elderly people, which sometimes involves little more than a 20-minute daily visit, should be scrapped as it prevents carers and the recipients of care from having time to talk?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm aware that Mr Mountain has had discussions around a Time to Talk campaign that he, as far as I understand, announced at the end of last year. He raises a very fair point about our ability to ensure that we are looking after people and ensuring that people receive good care. I think that's something that we can all agree should be done right across the chamber. People may have different ideas about how that can be done and the different models that can be used on that, but I'm sure the work that Mr Mountain is doing in his campaign will lead in very well to the work that we're all wanting to achieve across the chamber to ensure that people get the care that they rightly deserve and they should rightly have within their homes. And I'm sure Mr Mountain will continue his work on that campaign and inform the Scottish Government about exactly how we should do that.
Thank you very much. Question number 7, Stuart Stevenson.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the report Social Security Scotland Client Survey 2018-2020.
Cabinet Secretary.
I welcome this report, particularly its key finding that 90% of clients who responded said that their overall experience was very good or good. It's a credit to all of Social Security Scotland staff that they were given this endorsement by clients who were surveyed last year at a time when the agency's services and staff were all obviously coping with the serious disruptions of coronavirus. The agency was established on the basis that its system should be designed with the people of Scotland on the basis of evidence, and this report demonstrates the Scottish Government's determination to live up to that commitment. There will always, of course, be room for improvement, but these findings, for example, that the overwhelming majority of respondents, around 87%, said that they were treated with dignity, fairness and respect, are clear evidence of 2 things. Firstly, they show we are, in terms of our goal to deliver a Scottish social security system at its heart, succeeding well. But secondly, they show how far we have come in terms of moving away from the perceptions of a system operated from the DWP.
Stuart Stevenson.
The results of this survey are hugely encouraging. A welcome departure from the system that the UK government operates, which the rapporteur from the UN described as punitive, mean-spirited and often callous. So what lessons does the Cabinet Secretary think the UK government could learn from Scotland's social security system? And does she believe that people in Scotland should not be forced to accept toxic Tory policies?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think what we have achieved within social security in Scotland is a testimony to the hard work that's gone in, both within government, but very importantly within our key stakeholders and all the individuals with lived experience that have taken part in the process so that we could deliver the system that we are delivering on. I should, of course, pay tribute to my predecessor in this role, Jean Freeman, not just because she's sitting close to me in the Chamber, Presiding Officer, but also because, of course, of the work that she put in within this portfolio before I took over, setting the groundwork for the results that I'm announcing today. I think all of government can reflect upon what can be done when we have lived experience at the heart of our policy making. I don't think that's just a lesson for Scottish Government. I think that's a lesson for all public agencies right across the UK. It's the right way, it's the best way to make policy, and I, for one, am very pleased that Ms Freeman took the opportunity to make sure our social security system had that within its very bedrock as she set our system up.
Thank you very much, and that concludes portfolio questions. We're going to move on shortly to the next item of business. Just do a short change while we change seats. Short pause.